Okay, Cleveland Browns defeat the Baltimore Ravens 13-3 in one of the best games we saw all weekend. Nothing can top that. Certainly not a shootout between the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins that came down to the wire. Some of the other things that we saw, this was the most well-played game we've seen all season. Nothing happened that was out of the ordinary or wrong. Bri, the Cleveland Browns are now at 6-8. How are we feeling right now? And something I've talked about, I coming out of the Bengals game, my thought was the Browns could win all four. How are you feeling about the possibility of that happening?
I think it's a possibility at this point in time. Now, I will also say that the weather could be a factor come Saturday, that if there were no other outside factors weighing in on this team, I would say it's very possible to win their last 3 games. I think what I'm encouraged by the most is the fact that there does seem to be improvement with Deshaun Watson at quarterback. He seems to be getting more comfortable in the offense. His team around him seems to be more comfortable with the play calling. And quite frankly, the defense, Pete, although it is thinning out at some key positions, it does appear that they are showing a lot of fight. Understood that they gave up a lot of yards to the run game, but at the end of the day, they did what they needed to do, and they made plays. We came out of that game with a victory. So complain all you want about whatever you want, but at the end of the day, that was a game that the Browns won. And when I think about, I don't want to say the old Browns, but, we hear like same old Browns quite a bit in this fandom. That would have been a game that the Browns would have given up their lead and lost 10 out of 10 times if you're saying that they were the old Browns. That was just my feeling and thought coming out of that game.
Yeah, there's a lot to touch on with that and even fold into this week, because the Browns are going to play the New Orleans Saints, and the New Orleans Saints have former Cleveland Browns wide receiver Jarvis Landry, which has had all kinds of quotes from players talking about what he meant to the team and all the wonderful things he did. And then you get people who are like, caught up in their feelings about Jarvis Landry and going, this is when the turnaround started. And depending who you talk to, there is no turnaround and the Browns are still awful and always will be. Or, that was like the real launching point. And if you are believing in that theory, then this is sort of like an extension. This win against the Ravens is sort of an extension of that. Now, the Baltimore.
Listen, the other thing that I would just add to that is like this team, the Browns team specifically, had nothing to play for, right? I mean, I know that the players' mindset is of one game at a time. Like their mindset is they're not out until they're out. But we've seen in past a Browns team that has traditionally had a losing record at this stage in the season not show a lot of fight. And when I was watching that game, the Ravens, on the other hand, had a lot to play for. This team didn't give up. They played physical. They played hard. And they were in control of this game really the entire time, which was a nice change. There wasn't a lot of fireworks. I didn't see this offense just let loose as much as I thought that it would. And maybe that's to come. But overall, it was boring, but not in a bad way.
Right. It was interesting that coming out of this win, I saw columns from 2 different people that said, something the effect of the players haven't quit on Kevin Stefanski, which strikes me as very odd because I've never seen any indication they would be. But to your point, we have in the past.
Right.
And to your point that they are, theoretic, whatever very small mathematical chance, they are playing like a team that has something to play for. Now, I would argue that in many ways, the 6 games or these remaining 3 games, were the most important for the season because of Deshaun Watson and what that means. And I think there is a real buy-in. But I would also note that the players who are coming out and talking about how important this is, that notably the 2 guys I keep hearing from are Myles Garrett and David Njoku. They seem to be the most sort of vocal spokesperson. In fact, David Njoku.
Love that, by the way.
Well, Njoku said specifically that was one of the things, he sort of wanted to take from Landry was he wanted to be that guy. But what you're hearing from them is to say, our goal is to go 1-0 every week, which is Kevin Stefanski every press conference, every time he talks in the post-game pressers. And by the way, those are getting better. I think practice is helping. Win more games, Kevin, they get better. That's what he says all the time. And that's sort of what happens in these things is, your players start talking like coaches because they hear that they are so inundated with these messages that, it takes on a life of its own, which is good. It means they're listening, means they're buying in. I think those are all positive. The Baltimore Ravens were a very stupid team in this game. There's no getting around that. The Ravens could have run the ball, particularly with counter power, that type of stuff on the Browns seemingly forever. And I don't think the Browns were ever going to stop it. And yet they stopped, they do some other things. They'd pass the ball. It did, when they probably shouldn't. For all the stuff we can say about how stupid the Ravens were, the Browns did what they had to do. They stopped the Ravens enough. They held them to 3 points. They did a number of things that they do not do against the Ravens. And we'll get into some of those things. But to your point with the defense, like the defense gave up 3 points. You needed a program or name tags to keep up with some of these people because the Browns, as you mentioned, are so depleted. They are down to linebacker 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 at this point. You lost Jadeveon Clowney at the half. You lost John Johnson at one point, and I was honestly like, "Oh no, what are we doing here?" Ronnie Harrison suddenly dropping deep, and I'm just like, "Oh no." But because if you're a psychopath like me who pays attention, you know who all these people are. But if you're like Bri, you're sort of a Norman in this respect.
Do I take offense to that? Should I take offense to that? I have a podcast, but I don't know who 5, 6, and 7 are. Hey, and listen, Pete, I will say in years past, I was a bit more in the details, but now I feel like I just can't do it.
Well, 3 children, a career, and just life in general will eat into that. So that's where you sort of have this like forced, refreshing sort of breathing room that allows you to be a sane person that many of us are not dealing with this team. So like when I text you things like, do you tell your kids scary stories? Have they heard the one about the boogeyman Paul DePodesta yet? You probably have no idea what I'm talking about and just ignore it and respond to something else. Or
okay, no, I do know that. Come on, give me a little bit of credit.
Well, I know who Paul DePodesta is, but like, have you kept up with the like insanity that people are like wanting him to be fired?
Well, of course. Wait, if they're like. First of all, Browns fans, Twitter specifically, want everyone to be fired. So, like, at that point, you could just tell me a list of names and, like, oh, yeah, Browns Twitter probably wants them fired. Like,
yes.
Right.
But, like, people literally, and it is hysterical because it's terrifying in a number of ways, just sort of dovetails with certain other things going on in the world over the past couple of years. But regardless, people are like, will tweet at me with Paul DePodesta's record as a chief strategy officer, and I'm just like, what do you want me to do with this? Like, he doesn't. I've gotten things where he's been accused of hiring the coach and the GM, which he doesn't do. He is an advisor. He led the search, but he doesn't do any of these things. He strongly recommended Sean McDermott when the Browns hired Hugh Jackson. So it only goes so far. He's been accused of picking players. He has nothing to do with that. He's also been accused, these are just people who talk to me, of deciding who gets the money. None of these are his job, but he is at the heart of it all and deserves to be punished for.
Listen,
for people
need scapegoats, Pete. That's what it is.
Well,
people need scapegoats.
Yes.
Like, that's all it is. To fit whatever narrative that they are coming up with in their mind. Like, they need someone to blame for it. And these people just happen to be people that they go and pick to blame. It's
right.
Great.
So
entertaining. I find it very entertaining.
So the Browns ended up in this game on both sides of the ball, playing with a number of people, that we haven't really run into a whole lot this season or have played very small roles, sticking only to offense and defense. I have a list of names for Bri. They played in this game. They contributed at some point on both those sides of the ball. And she's going to tell me if this player is on the Browns or not. And the first one I think she will do fine with.
I can't believe you're doing this on my own podcast. I can't believe this.
Well, it's content. You're the star of the show here. This is why it's important.
So people can attack me for more things.
Well, no, I think my overall point is like most people like, and I'm talking, people who do pay a whole lot of attention have no idea who some of these people are. I guarantee it.
All right. I'm ready.
Now, the first one I'm confident you will get because you're a fan. Dalen Baldwin.
Yes. So were you impressed that I texted you about this? Because
yes, I was.
I actually didn't know what number he was. But when he made those first few plays, I was like, okay, let me back up a minute. Pete, I couldn't watch the entire first quarter because I was in Michigan.
Yeah.
So
I forgot about this. Is important. Yes. Go ahead.
So I was in Michigan with my in-laws because we celebrated Christmas with them. And we were obviously watching NFL Network, and the game before, obviously an amazing comeback. We were all really into it, but I was like sitting there getting panicky because I'm like, I don't want this game to go into overtime. I want to watch the Browns game because I knew that the game was going to start and I wasn't going to be able to watch it. So of course I tweet my displeasure, and I have, I don't even know, 50 some responses telling me that it was on local ABC. And I was like, you guys think that I wouldn't have found a way to watch this game had I been in I was not in a market situation. So I could not watch the game. But my favorite thing, Pete, were the responses I was getting still on Sunday morning. I was like, okay, thanks for being helpful for this. This game was over 12 hours ago, but thank you. So yes, I missed the entire first quarter, and I did not go back and watch it because I didn't think that there was a need to go back and watch it.
How would you have?
So, okay, if you want to talk about this, test will be interesting. I do record every Browns game on my YouTube TV. It just automatically records it. So I don't know if it would have picked up the in market at home. I actually didn't check that. So I don't know. I guess it could have it on my TV here, but I never went back.
Yeah, so that's its own interesting element and this was the part that I did not expect to happen. Is because the game was on NFL Network and they had the other game going on, all of a sudden Rich Eisen's talking through the game. He goes, oh, by the way, there's no commercial breaks because it's not on actual NFL Network at this point. So we're just going to cruise on through. That quarter was over in 20 minutes. It was so fast.
Okay, I was wondering about that because I'm sitting there on my ESPN app, trying to keep up to date, and the overtime game is happening. And I was like, there's still 6 minutes and 40 seconds left in this overtime game. I'm like, meanwhile, the Browns game is almost out of the first quarter. I'm like, how is this happening? So they literally had no commercial break.
No, and they had the first commercial break at the end of the first quarter, and the OT game was still going. But yeah, that was the first. I think it ended right there. But the end of the first quarter was the first commercial break you had once the game started. So it just flew by. It was great. And I have to imagine that since the NFL has been on TV, that is the fastest quarter that has ever happened. Meanwhile, the contrast was that Colts overtime took forever.
Yes.
Anyway, Dalen Baldwin.
Yes.
You were excited. I was excited. Because when the Browns added him to the practice squad, as we saw him in preseason, and you're like, he kept just catching passes, and God knows how many guys the Browns have had in their time that have done this, where you're forgettable. I'm sure if we did this live on Twitter, there'd be a list of names that I can't think of at the moment of guys that were hyped in preseason. But Dalen Baldwin was a guy who was pretty good in preseason. And you're just like, all right, I'm hoping he can get to the practice squad. Boom, he gets to the practice squad. He's basically 6'2", 212 pounds, I think, listed, which is the exact same size as David Bell, was obviously unable to play in this game. He's basically those are the same dimensions pretty much as Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones. He just fits that mold. Now, the thing that makes Dalen Baldwin more interesting is he's a rookie, but he's the same age as Donovan Peoples-Jones, and both guys went to Michigan. So there was this sort of added little element that it was sort of interesting. But yes, he catches back-to-back balls. Yes. And I immediately get a text. And then I think he got hurt and then sort of disappeared.
Okay, so one of my kids at training camp got his autograph, which is also why I knew him, because He was one of the first players out there signing, and my daughter got picked to go stand in his line. And, of course, in training camp, I'm like, who is this guy?
Sure.
But very sweet. And so we have his autograph. So I was really rooting for him.
See, you hate this, and now we got a whole tangent out of one guy's name.
Listen, right. When I also texted you, I was like, oh, I told you, like, I feel like I am mothers to all of these young rookie players,
sure.
My sons.
And I'm curious to see what happens with him. I don't.
Listen, we need receivers.
Yeah, I mean, there's that, but he's not on the injury report as far as I know. So I guess he's okay. Next name, Ben Stilley. Is he a Brown or is he not?
No,
he is a Brown.
Okay, what does
line.
He play?
He was in the game. He's been here a little bit.
He was on the offensive line.
No, defensive line.
Oh, okay. I thought you said. I was like, what? How did I miss that? Okay.
Yeah. All right. Demetric.
How many snaps? Wait, how many snaps did he play?
I think a dozen or so. That's usually about how much he plays every week. Demetric Jones. Is he a Brown or not?
No.
Correct. Rich Eisen thinks he's a Brown because he called Demetric Felton Demetric Jones on the opening play of the game when Demetric Felton caught a pass. So no, Demetric Jones, not even a real person as far as I know, is relative to the NFL. I'm sure there's somebody named Demetric Jones out there, but nevertheless. All right, next one. Jermaine Carter Jr.
Yes.
He is a real player. He is a linebacker. He's been on the practice squad. He's been on the practice squad the whole season, but he played snaps. He was called up to basically replace Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who went out with the foot injury for the season. So, yeah, he is a real player, and he had a couple tackles, I think. He was not very good. Next one up, Derek Hall.
Yes.
No, he is a defensive end I really like out of Auburn, who's going to be in the NFL draft, but is not on the Browns.
Hey, right. Pete. Also, just to mention, when we get into like January, February podcast, I'm like all out on like draft talk. That's where I draw the line, Pete.
No, that's fine. There's all kinds of stuff we can talk about. Trust me, I have people for that. All right, next up, DeAnthony Bell.
Yes.
He is a real player, safety. When John Johnson went out, Ronnie Harrison went back, and DeAnthony Bell came in for a couple snaps as that extra safety in the box. DeAnthony Bell is a very, very good special teams player. He was the guy in preseason who punched the ball out, and everybody was very excited about. He's very old for rookies, like 25.
He's very old for a rookie.
Well, he played at like North Florida or something.
Football years. College. He's old.
Yeah. Next one. Jordan Kunashik.
Yes.
He is. And
I know this one. I also saw his picture on, the Browns Instagram, and you said his name a couple podcasts ago, and I'm like,
I did. And
never heard of this guy before.
Now I know how to pronounce his name correctly because his wife, who has followed me since I liked him coming out of Cal, informed me of how it was pronounced. And the reason this came up is because listening to Browns coaches' press conferences, they must all call him Jordan because Mike Prefer called him he called him Jordan. It wasn't Jordan Kunazik because that's what I always called him. It was like he called him Jordan Kunachik. And then Joe Woods called him Jordan Kunastic, which, seemed appropriate for a linebacker. But no, his wife told me it is Kunashik. All right.
I'm sorry. So you were friends with his wife?
Well, his wife has, what happens, especially in the draft process with like some of these guys who are like not super highly rated. Although that does bring me, I got an interview with Derek Carr when he was coming out of Fresno State because his wife liked what I wrote about him. So it does help, but yes, shout out to his I think girlfriend at the time when he was coming out of Cal, since I think married, but yeah, she's anytime I mention the name at some point, she's going to like the tweet. Anyway, there's been some other players. One who now works in the Browns front office. What's his face? A guard out of Harvard. I love this kid, and I was all about him. And his dad would email me all the time. He was really grateful that I was like a fan of his kid, his son. And then like at one point I was like, as much as I do, I guess, spraining news, the dad emails me and goes, oh, he's going to sign with the practice squad. And I go, oh, sources, this guy's going to sign with the practice squad. And then he signs with Washington's practice squad. He emails back. He goes, well, he really wanted to go play, get the opportunity to get coached by who else? Bill Callahan. So that's how he ended up there. So like all these people like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's like, Dad told me. And now he works in the Browns front office as like some level person anyway. Continuing. Next name up, Isaiah Foskey.
No.
That's good. He is not. He's a Notre Dame pass rusher. Again, somebody I like in the draft. Do
you like my confidence in all of these answers?
That was confident. That was good. You were not confident in Jermaine Carter Jr. Nevertheless, you got it correct. All right. Next one up, Kendre Miller.
Yes.
No, running back at TCU. Really, really nice player.
If only you guys could see my face with every answer.
Last one, Reggie Ragland.
No.
Reggie Ragland is on the Browns. He was on the field for 2 plays. Former big-time player at Alabama.
What position?
Linebacker. Any here, let me look. Out of the names I had, one.
I was going to say, what are their positions? Lots of defense.
Ben Stilley, defensive line. Dalen Baldwin, obviously a wide receiver. Jermaine Carter Jr., linebacker. DeAnthony Bell, safety. Jordan Kunashik, linebacker. And Reggie Ragland, linebacker. I mean, that's what happens. I mean, the only other linebacker who played in this game is Deion Jones. Like, that is what they are down to because they've lost.
What's the practice squad salary? Just out of curiosity.
It's not standard. Like, there's some weird wiggle room there.
Okay.
Like, it's not like public, but you can pay more or less depending on. So like that is a little inside, like super inside football type of thing in terms of like what can come down on some of these situations as far as like bonuses and stuff. But league minimum for a regular salary of a player who's not vested, I think, is 250,000 still. Maybe it's 300 at this point. So it's, but for them, they're basically getting weekly paychecks. It's a little different. But yeah, they have lost Sione Takitaki. They lost JOK. They lost Anthony Walker Jr. They lost Jacob Phillips. I mean, this is what this defense was. So, I mean, I'm 100% granting. I'm telling you, yes, the Ravens were stupid. They did a lot of things that made no sense relative to what they fit. But all the players we just talked about, other than Dalen Baldwin, were on this defense and played in this game and helped hold the Ravens to 3 points. So none of this is to say that, one of the funniest parts about this game winning is the first thing I heard just driving on Monday morning was, oh no, if the Browns win out, Joe Woods might keep his job. This is where we're at. We can find a way to hate whatever. If they lose, everybody should be fired. If they win, somebody might not be fired, and that is bad. Like, we can't enjoy anything for even a moment. So look, I wrote this. It's pretty simple. There are people who are like, oh, if they win these last 3 games, it'll save his job. Either Kevin Stefanski believes in Joe Woods as a defensive coordinator, or he doesn't. If we will be at 52 games after these last 3, and unless miraculously they make the playoffs and have a 53rd, 52 games, these 3 aren't going to change his mind. He either thinks he's the guy or he doesn't. And we'll see where he ends up. It's fascinating to me that people are so super confident one way or the other. But we shall see. But to his credit, what's his face? Trotter, ESPN Trotter was tweeting out all these stats about how the Browns have improved efficiency. And like all these people are going, oh, well, they played, the Texans and the Ravens. Well, some of those stats included Miami, Buffalo, and other things. The defense has gotten better. I attribute a lot of that to young guys figuring it out. We're seeing more production and effectiveness out of Perry and Winfrey. We're seeing more out of Alex Wright. We're seeing some more contributions from some of those guys. Greg Newsome is getting more comfortable at that, that multifaceted outside inside role he's playing. So there's going to be a natural improvement that comes with that. I don't think that's too surprising. That's, you know, regardless of who's coordinating this defense next year, that is what you wanted to have out of this. You want to see these young guys get better. You want to see them prove they can be something. Now we'll see what happens. But to me, those things are important, and it's a lot. When you hear it on the radio, it's content, which is fine. But it's just always funny that like there is always a way to find the negative with this team.
Well, can I ask you a question though? Because we saw this similar trend last year at the end of the season where the defense got better, which gave us a lot of hope going into this season. We expected them to continue down that same pace. Why is it that this defense starts off so slow then? Like, why is it that they can't get it together earlier on in the season? Like, why does it have to take 11 or 12 games for them to figure things out? Like, what does that say?
Well,
I know we had a lot of turnover on, like we've talked about the defensive line essentially changing over in terms of like what you're dealing with in the middle. But for the most part, like the secondary held outside of the linebacker position, which just got wrecked. But like, it feels like they're playing better with less continuity on the defensive side versus when they started the season.
Well, I think a lot of that comes down to when we talk about when they went from last year's defense to this year's defense, like they got younger, which was hard to do given what the Browns had before. I mean, they had JOK was a rookie. Greg Newsome was a rookie. You're like, wow, they've got a lot of young guys on this defense. They had Tommy Togiai was a rookie, didn't really play much. Jordan Elliott was a second-year guy, didn't really play much. But these were all like these guys. They had all these younger players sort of in this pipeline. You're going, Jacob Phillips, Tony Fields. These were all super young players. Grant Delpit was in his second year. And you're sitting there going, oh, well, I mean, in another year, these guys will be all be better and it should be a better unit. Then you throw in the wrench, and the wrench is named Deshaun Watson. And when you traded for Deshaun Watson, part of what the Browns did to sort of balance their books was to let a whole bunch of people walk. And what I think what people forget is who they lost over the course of last season. So, going into the draft, they picked Martin Emerson, who's been great, is a rookie, but he's been really good. And then they come out of the draft and they go, oh, we don't need Troy Hill anymore. So they trade him to the Rams. We get a draft pick. They had MJ Stewart at that point, who played really, really well down the stretch last year as that slot safety role. He was like fantastic. He goes and signs with the Houston Texans. They had the two Maliks last year, and neither one was very good, but they at least understood how they were supposed to play. Now, the one is still a free agent, but they let him walk. And the other is God only knows, given what happened to him almost immediately into the offseason. So that was another group of guys. One of the guys you don't really think about because of the way he ended last year was Takk McKinley. Takk McKinley tore his Achilles. But they replaced him with Chase Winovich, who has been injured most of the season and hasn't done much. So a lot of the turnover from that, you lost other guys. Malcolm Smith's another guy who's sort of a glue guy, linebacker. Everybody called him Pops, all this other stuff. Like these were people that you're sitting there going, well, he didn't make a huge impact. But I think I counted it up the other day. And it was something like 3,200 snaps or something. It was like 22% of their defensive snaps were rolled over and turned over. And a lot of people are like, well, accurately, those weren't exactly the biggest guys to lose. But you're then replacing them with Perrion Winfrey, who doesn't know what he's doing, or didn't at that point. Alex Wright, who doesn't know what he's at UAB, for God's sake. This is a massive jump in competition. And you've got Martin Emerson, who's overachieved, but he's a rookie. Greg Newsome then gets pushed into this slot role. He hasn't really played, so it's been sort of like thrown into the deep end and trying to swim his way out. And to his credit, he's gotten a lot better. And then some of these other things just haven't worked. Like, I was certainly in the boat that thought Grant Delpit was going to have a breakout season. That has not happened. He has a role, but you're not sitting there going, wow, Grant Delpit's a great player. He's good at what he does. And like JOK was minimized. He came out like gangbusters those first two games, and then it wasn't very good for a while. In no small part to the defensive line woes that they've had that didn't help. That sort of hurt him. And then lest we forget that Myles Garrett was in a car accident and Jadeveon Clowney was hurt and they both missed time at the exact same time. Like the two most important players on your defense missed time. So none of this is to say that, well, this is really bad luck. Joe Woods deserves another year, because like I said, 52 games is 52 games, regardless of what they have talent wise. And it's fair to say that Joe Woods has sort of been asked to take his turn multiple times. And especially this year where in 2020, he was basically asked to put together a defense of spare parts, save for Myles Garrett, Sheldon Richardson, and Denzel Ward. They had a couple other guys, but that was the year of just randos playing safety and all those other things. And it was sort of like, okay, well, hang in there. We got to get through this and then we'll do it. And then the following year they do get JOK and they do get Greg Newsome. They do add some pieces, but defensive tackle gets young, super young. They let Larry Ogunjobi and Ragland go, or Richardson go. Richardson's still sitting out there as a free agent if anyone wants him. And it's sort of like, okay, it's better. And obviously they played better defense last year. They were, middle of the pack defensive efficiency. And there's some metrics that'll say top 10. Then this year, it becomes, okay, let's build this thing. Oh, wait a minute. And I 100% agree with their approach, is saying, no, the quarterback is the most important thing. We have to deal with that. Regardless of how you feel about Deshaun Watson, that was the number one thing on the top of their chart, their guardrails and all this up, is the quarterback. And it was like, all right, we got the quarterback. We gave up 6 picks. We guaranteed $230 million. And in line with that, Joe, I know we said we'd do this, and this, but we need you to hang in there again and try to make the best of it. So like all that sort of like, you can sort of be very sympathetic to Woods, and they've sort of been like hanging in there for a while. But, Stefanski is going to have to determine, he knows what this guy wants to do defensively. He knows what his game plans are. He knows what his adjustments are. He's seen him do this over and over and over again. So like I said, he's either going to believe in it or he's not. He's either going to say to himself, well, if we address this talent, it's going to finally be there. Or he's sitting there going, man, I can beat this defense pretty easily. If I can do it, then anyone else can. So I need to go get somebody else. And you look at like how he handled Baker Mayfield. He's not afraid to cut the cord when he feels like it's going to help him win, and for the sake of the team, if you want to look at it from that route, and what he's been willing to put himself in front of with Deshaun Watson would suggest that much more, that he's willing to sort of make those tough choices. Obviously it's a little different. It's not a player, it's a coach, and I'm sure it's a friend of his, but I think the way the organization is set up, I think they are very clear-headed in this stuff. And even if Stefanski isn't, I think Andrew Berry, and more specifically, this is where the people who hate Paul DePodesta for reasons they don't know, because they don't know what his actual job is, are going to appreciate him, because his whole job really comes down to keep the organization and the team focused on their goals. If Joe Woods does not fit in their goals, he's going to say, we need to move on. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to have the final say. It's just that is sort of the reminder he's going to provide to allow Kevin Stefanski, hopefully. This is Kevin Stefanski's decision. Ultimately, he needs to be the one that makes it. So that's where you sort of get in this thing where you can sort of see why the defense wouldn't be where you'd like it to be. Now, that doesn't excuse some of the things that they've had, like communication issues and some of the stuff that were like, these are players that have been here. How is this still happening with like safeties who have been, they aren't new. Why isn't this working as well? And that's a real criticism. Those are valid. So that very long-winded answer that hopefully gives you some clarity, but yeah, it
just sounds like a lot of excuses, Pete.
Well, that's what I'm here for. It's just, it's tough when you're like, yeah, people are like, well, they've been in the system 3 years. So Martin Emerson's been here for, this is his rookie year. Perrin Winfrey he's a rookie. He's playing a lot more, which is good. Alex Wright, he's a rookie. Like, and you went into a season with not a single defensive tackle that's done anything in football that means anything. I think we were, and I'm in this. I didn't think they'd be a top 5 defense like some people did, but I thought they'd be better than they were. But when you watch it, you're sort of like, okay, I get it. And again, there are real criticisms to be had. There are real issues to address that need to be ironed out one way or the other. If they keep Joe Woods for another year, they have to be better, because you're then it does. Now we're in a position where it really matters. Now you're trying to contend. You are expecting to be good, and you can't be losing games to basically dumb shit. So that's where, the rubber meets the road, which is what this whole thing's been leading up to. I mean, even, segueing into Cade York and the people who are very upset with Cade York because he's not as good as everybody wants him to be and as good as he looked in the summer and all that. He's in that it wasn't really about this year. Obviously, look, there's no question they hoped he'd be better than 22 of 30 as a rookie, but next year is when that really matters and when that has to be fixed. And, him having these issues from that right hash in particular is obviously a thing that needs to be fixed. Now, I do have a theory on how they can fix this for Cade York, and that is that when it is June and July here, and we're in the summer, if he's sent after minicamp in the break between minicamp and training camp to somewhere, I don't know, Argentina or Chile, when it's wintertime and we send him up a set of uprights, he can kick in the weather all he wants and get him ready for the season. But like these people are like, you got to get rid of Cade. They're not doing that. They're not getting rid of Cade York. They're going to have him fix it. And the whole reason is because in addition to the clear talent, the kid has talent. There's no denying that he has ability. It's also because he costs nothing. That the benefit of taking him as a 4th-round pick is he makes under $1 million a year for the 4 years. So they are going to give him every opportunity to make this work. Now, if they're next year and they're losing games when they should be winning them because of York, then they will have to make a change. But hopefully by then he's sort of figured it out. I'd remind people, and I've had to remind people, Phil Dawson in his rookie year was 8 of 12 kicking field goals. It wasn't until year four that he attempted a field goal of 50 plus. So we have a habit of sort of throwing kickers out really, really fast.
Right.
And Cleveland's a hard place to kick. And we're sitting there going, well, why haven't we found our Justin Tucker? And then if you watch that Colts game in all the madness, they kicked 5 field goals with none other than former Browns kicker Chase McLaughlin, who has been the AFC Special Teams Player of the Week. And before you mention it, yes, he was kicking in a dome. And when people are going to inevitably try to get rid of Cade York, here's what I can promise you will happen. He will end up on a team that kicks in a dome, and he will sit there and bomb one from 65. It'll go through the uprights, and everyone will be going, why did we ever get rid of this guy? He's got to get used to it. Obviously, people are going to point to Evan McPherson and his rookie year, and I get it, but I would also suggest that maybe that was not the norm. Maybe that was just a very special year, but this is the path they've chosen. They've got to figure it out.
Well, yeah, but I think it's the Browns' way, I guess, or the fans' preference to just give up and move on at any type of adversity, right? And kicker is really the one place where it seems that we as fans really at all in this particular position. And the fact that we did use a draft pick to go get him just kind of adds to that annoyance, if that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I have a hard time figuring out with people who are upset about players or coaches or whatnot, and their solution is to just fire everyone or cut them. I don't see a lot of people coming to the table with solutions. So they're quick to say, we don't need them, just get rid of them. But there's really never any thought process as to, okay, well, then what's your answer? Because you have to have a kicker. So then what is it? Like, Browns fans are I don't want to put all of us in the same bucket, but a lot of Browns fans are delusional in a sense of that we are going to get rid of players or coaches and fill them in with someone that is even better or highly sought after. And we've talked about this, Pete. There are not coaches or players itching to be with the Cleveland Browns for whatever reason. Now, I think that can change because the staff that we have in place currently, there has been that continuity and there hasn't been that turnover. And from a player standpoint, I do believe this roster is building a case where free agents maybe want to come to Cleveland based on what they are building. But that's going to take time, and we're not quite there yet. But I have a really hard time with the people who wants to move on for whatever reason, and they don't actually have a legitimate answer as to what we would do then to backfill them. And I don't want to say, like, don't just throw out names, because half the names that they're like, people are saying, like, Mike Tomlin, go hire Mike Tomlin as our defensive coordinator, as if he's not going to still be the coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers next year.
Which includes media members. There are media members, like, I had cited at one point a Terry Pluto article, and he says flat out when he advocates firing Joe Woods, I don't know if this will work. You got to give me more than that. Like, that's the point. It can't just be, we'll change something and we'll see what happens. Like that. That's not how this organization works. And to your point, or I would say, the Browns front office has become that. The Browns front office is you can say what you want about everything else. And I think that, to your point, it is a work in progress, but the front office is a desirable job right now. The Browns front office is launching careers. It's the one place you can say, you can say right now, if working for the Browns was a net positive to careers, and you see Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah working as the GM of the Vikings, and they're having a great year. You look at the fact that both of their lieutenants under Andrew Berry are listed as sort of up and coming stars. The whole reason they got Catherine Raish in the first place was because the Browns were. And I had somebody, I was about ready to lose it on somebody who suggested Catherine Raish was a PR hire. She is more qualified to do most anything in this world than you can possibly find. Like, her resume is unbelievable. Like, you're like, she's, I think, trilingual, and she, went from the Canadian Football League to the I think it was either the AFL or the XFL the first time. Got defunct. Then she gets a job with the Eagles, and she's like brilliant, like going, well, they hired a woman because of Deshaun Watson stuff. Like, if they were going to do that, I would have thought they would have had a press conference, which never happened, which I always thought was interesting. Now, I get it, because I think the question that was inevitably going to be asked, which would have been super unfair, was like something effective. How do you work for an organization? Or what would you have done presented with the option to get this player? But the Browns have launched Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's career as a GM. They are probably going to lose another one in this year or next, and it's going to continue to do that. And when that happens, what do you get? You get people who go, no, I want to work for the Browns. They're doing something that is enabling our people in my profession
highly sought after positions.
Yes, and it's like, you're basically going, well, if I take basically what amounts to an internship with the Browns, if I do a couple of years with the Browns, it's going to set me up. And you want that to be what happens to coaches. And for 20 something years, coaches did not leave the Browns better for it. Most of them have either gone back to being coordinating or just got out of coaching entirely. And that's not what you want. And that's part of the thing, is when you're saying, well, you fire this guy, you're sitting there going, well, we're giving him a vacation or wherever, he doesn't have to work the rest of the year. I guess that's true. But the immediate reaction he's having is, most of these guys have, wives and kids or whatever their family situation is. And then they go home and go, well, I guess we got to move again. And, it's a tough thing, because like there's an inherently nomadic lifestyle that comes with coaching, but like, and everybody's different, but on some level, some of these people who have families are sitting there going, I don't want to put my kids in a new school every year. I want to have something where I can look ahead and go, can I be there at least like 3 years and give them some sense of normalcy? Or, like, those become conversations. Like, somebody may get, so let's, if the Browns move on from Joe Woods or whatever, and they're looking at coordinators, if the perception is that Kevin Stefanski is effectively on the hot seat, do I really want to go there because maybe it's one and done? Or is the perception that, no, it's noise around what's going on there. They really like Kevin. They really like Kevin. They believe in what he's doing. And this could be a good situation for me. then that maybe opens up the conversation, because ultimately, you know, the guy may get a call and be really excited about the defensive coordinator job or whatever, because he's like, I've never been a coordinator before, or I really like the talent this team has and all these other things. And they go home and they talk to the wife and the kids, and they, you know, and they go, well, you know, I got this great opportunity. And then the reality hits, and, you know, ambition meets trying to do the best for everyone, you know, and it's a challenging situation for anybody to be like, well, this is a great opportunity for me, but I also want to not completely destroy, you know, life here or whatever it is. And that becomes a really delicate balancing act. And I think people struggle with that. And we've used this as an example before. But, you know, do you want to work for Elon Musk right now? Which, by the way, is even more unstable than it was the last time I asked this question. It's like, yeah, you can move your family to wherever to work for him, and maybe there's more money involved and more prestige, but the volatility there, you could be out in a couple months, 6 months, a year. Is it worth it? Maybe it is for some people, but there's probably a whole lot of people who are sitting there going, I'd rather not do that. I'd rather find a more stable job in the same field or whatever. So like, it's a tough deal. And it's the same with players. Like,
yeah, I just don't think, like, us as fans, we're not patient enough. And I don't think people want to be okay with mediocrity. And we've been a losing football team for countless number of years. And so like a small taste of victory really just leaves us clamoring for more. And I think with that comes this impatience of not being okay with the continuity and wanting to see accountability in a sense of firing everyone or seeing immediate turnover. But I think we have to recognize and acknowledge that that is not an easy fix, and that's not what's best long term. Because to your point, you're not going to bring in top talent by starting all over and burning things down. People don't want to come to that, as you were saying. And we do have to give credit for this front office in a sense that they are very progressive. They are leading this organization. They're leading the league just in terms of like their thought process, hiring minorities, women in this business. You know, I do think that is something this organization values. And I do think that that matters. Like, you want to be working for an organization and or a company, if you live a normal life, that values the people that work for them and that are striving to move forward instead of being stuck in the past. And so I do think what they are building is that. And by firing everyone and starting over again, like, that's not where we want to be. And I'm totally fine if Kevin Stefanski wants to move on from Joe Woods. I think they would have to have a plan in place in order to do that. This team has been very open about having plans. I mean, we went through an entire COVID season hearing about plans, plan Bs, plan Cs, like they have a plan for their plan. So I don't think that they would make this decision and not have someone in mind. But we have to remember, you guys, if there's not a better option out there, let's not just fire someone for the sake of firing someone. Like, can we please just stop this?
Yes, there are a section of fans and media who are already pre-slitting throats if Joe Woods is retained for another year.
Yeah, and I get it. But also, like, it's not that simple. It's really not that simple. And I haven't seen a solution that appears to be a better option at this point. And if a realistic one.
Right. If Kevin Stefanski fires Joe Woods will have been here 3 years. Right. It is not a rash. And he will have done right by him in terms of not firing him during the season and not, putting that upheaval on him. And if Joe Woods is fired, it's not Hugh Jackson. People are not going to be cheering in that building. Like, there may be some people who are like, no, I'd rather go somewhere else. But I think Joe Woods is viewed as a good man. Like, he's a good, decent person. Like, I love his press conferences. They're great. He's very
I do too. And I've told you that. Like, I feel like he's very transparent and he's open and he's honest and he doesn't seem to have a huge ego surrounding him. And he's okay admitting when he's wrong or when he can do better. Like, I do think players would like that type of personality.
Well, we get into what's important about coaching, and like you hear all the stuff that's like, trying to fill
Hang
a movie.
on. Yes. I was going to say, like, why do fans think that coaches need to be yelling and spitting and doing things like this and then just yell in their face? Like, is that I'm sorry, is that motivating?
Well, you tell me. You are a former and current elite athlete, has played at the highest levels. No, and I asked this to Abby, and I've talked about this from my perspective. What makes a good coach? You have a more than valid perspective on this. What is important for you as a coach? And I'm gonna pre-guess that volume was never part of it.
No, in fact, my high school basketball coach that I had sophomore year through senior year was fiery and loud and yelled, and we all hated him. Hated him. He also was dumb as a box of rocks and didn't know what he was doing, so that also didn't help. But like, you don't need that to be motivated. In fact, like, I almost think in some ways it's insulting a little bit to think that adults, I mean, high school kids / 20 to 30-year-old professional football players need someone to yell in their face in order to be motivated.
Right. Like, we're not even talking about kids. We are talking about grown-ass men in this case.
Yes. And might I just go on a little bit of a tangent here, because I'm a parent, and I think the mindset as you're raising children is that I think is also very outdated, is disciplinary measures, in a sense that if your children don't listen, you also need to scream at them and berate them and belittle them in order to get them to listen. No, you were actually just inciting fear in your children. My husband and I don't even have that approach in our parenting techniques. Like, we are very much teachers. We are, let's redo this situation. Let's talk about it. Like, we are modeling behavior that we want our children to eventually grow up. Like, to me, like, that's the whole takeaway here, is that I just think it's this old thought process that is just very outdated. And, maybe the quiet leader or the servant leader, as Kevin Stefanski described himself, just is newer to what a lot of people are used to seeing or used to experiencing themselves, but it doesn't make it wrong.
Well, I would argue that whether you're a fiery coach or you're not, the biggest thing your players want is an understanding of what is expected. In other words, you go into your practice facility, you go to the practice field, whatever, you know what you are supposed to do, what is expected of you. It's not somebody flying off the handle at random.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't help anything. Like, I can only speak for my...
If anything, it causes the fight or flight response, right? Where you then just immediately kind of lock up and you're like, what is going on?
Or, you just wait, you get in that mode where you just wait for the yelling to stop.
Or roll your eyes.
You're not listening to anything. You just...
Yeah.
But like, I can only speak from my experience. The only thing that really drive me nuts as a coach that like makes me want to yell is effort. Like, if you're efforting, you're putting in the necessary effort to do what we're trying to do. The other stuff will happen, or it won't. Like, you're either going to play well or you're not. Like, at that point, you are communicating what you want them to understand and all those things, and supporting them in that way. I think what ends up happening with Kevin Stefanski and why people like him as a coach is because he is so insistent on giving players ownership. They are part of they contribute to what they have there. So when you see some of these things that people are echoing what he's saying and all these other things, is because they feel like it, they don't feel like it's Kevin Stefanski's team. They feel like it's our team. Right. We're all a part of this. And that's where you get to a point where you're in a good spot. You want to be good, or you want to be better because it's ours. I don't want to let our team down. I don't want to let my teammates down. I don't want to, and there's some element, if you get that, I don't want to let my coach down. And it's not because they're going to yell at me. It's because this is important to me, and they've made it to a point that this is important to me. Where in I think with previous iterations of this team, it always felt like it was, players would come here and it was like a hostel. This is a place you stay for a little while and potentially make a good amount of money at, but it's not really a place you feel ownership. And I think when Stefanski came, that was a major, major change, which is why you got the Jarvis Landrys to be, as invested as they were, or some of the other players they've gotten, Joe Bitonio and all these other guys who are so passionate about what this team makes. And then, what happens at that point? Kevin Stefanski doesn't have to yell, because then it's an understanding. Like, players take care of these issues, or other coaches take care of these issues. Like, you don't need to be in a situation. There's no need to yell at that point. And the other one that drives me absolutely insane is just stupid, is the people who are like, well, all Kevin does is sit there and stare at his Denny's menu or whatever insert chain restaurant. They all do it. All of Jeff Saturday had a menu he was looking at in the form of a play sheet as the Colts were tanking that game away. Mike Tomlin has a play sheet, like Mike Vrabel, everybody's superstar coach, the people they desperately want, because he looks the part of the coach and he does all these things that make him look like a coach. And none of that is discredit him. He's very good at what he does, but he has a play sheet. Like, they all do it. So it's just, again, it's casting a movie role. You want to go watch Remember the Titans? There's no play sheet. It's just Denzel Washington talking to his various guys. And it looks great because it's on. It looks great, but it's not practical. It's not real football. It's not, and obviously that's older, but the game has changed. So, like, this idea that you're just going to yell at guys and it's going to do something is just, it doesn't work anymore. You want people to be part of a partnership. You want people to have shared ownership. That's ultimately what makes good teams operate. In the same way that, I'm trying to think who even is a team or a coach where they do. Mike Tomlin doesn't do that. Like, this is a team on one of the most, I've never seen anything like this. 4th and 27 or 29, 4th and 27, and a Steelers player goes into the opposing huddle during a commercial break and gets a personal foul, giving that team, or unsportsmanlike conduct, which is worse, gives them an automatic first down. I've never seen that anything like that. I didn't see him go off the handle. I didn't see him go off the handle with Deontay Johnson when he got a really stupid taunting penalty. He doesn't do that stuff. Like, he talks to his guys, but that's not how he operates. And everybody likes to use him as a foil, but he already does all these things. It's the same deal. Like, Mike Tomlin is so good, or I should say the Steelers culture is so pervasive because it's immediately under, when you think of Mike Tomlin, you know exactly what is happening there. You know exactly what you sort of picture in your head, or the various characteristics you have in there. And none of them are Mike Tomlin yelling at guys. It's the effort piece. It's the never say die attitude. It's not how he's doing that. And it's funny when you listen to Mike Tomlin or John Harbaugh answer questions about potentially firing coaches, and they're just sitting there laughing at people. And it's great. I wish Kevin Stefanski would do some more of that stuff. But yeah, it's always interesting when we get into conversations about coaching, because you and I both have unique perspectives on this. And I think, certain people who think like this, the coaches that may have coached them in their sports have been dead for many, many years at this point. They're gone and they're not coming back. And I don't know what it's going to take to get them to sort of let go of those ideals. But the former Marine drill sergeant who, is trying to raise the next generation of, soldiers isn't coaching your son's team anymore. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
They are still, however, coaching the kindergarten, first grade team in my area, Pete. Hence why little dude did not sign up.
it's that part of it's youth sports is really tough. You have to be,
it's bad.
If we could probably do a podcast entirely on advice for those people, but be very sure about who's coaching your kids at that level, any level really, but specifically that level. The biggest upset to me in this game, getting back to the Ravens, the Browns special teams beat the Ravens. I don't think I've ever seen that happen in a game between these two teams. The Ravens are routinely one of, if not the best special teams groups in the league. Obviously, they have the greatest kicker of all time. But they are usually phenomenal at kick and punt return. They've got a good punter they drafted the same round as the Browns picked, Cade York. And I couldn't believe it. Obviously, Justin Tucker misses the one field goal. And there was some part of this almost like that doesn't happen against us. We don't that he's vulnerable. He's human. And then they go one better and block one, which you're just like,
right.
Oh, game's over at that point.
That's exactly how I felt. And that's why I said, in the past, it always felt like teams that make these mistakes or don't execute find ways to always come back and win.
Mm-hmm.
But when we blocked that field goal, I was like, okay, feels like this
Game's
is our
over.
game.
Yes.
Like it just felt different this time around. Like we were not going to let them win when that happened.
Absolutely. And that is a testament to what's gone on. And I've been very critical of Mike Prefer in the past, but the past month, his special teams unit has been like dynamite, like has beaten every team they've played in this stretch. And even when I was talking about, writing about, well, how did the Browns beat the Ravens? I always figured, well, I even said flat out, I don't expect the Browns special teams to beat the Ravens. I just expect them not to be a massive liability, and they go out and win. And that's a big reason they won this game. And obviously, poor Jacoby Brissett, he goes from getting virtually no help from the defense and even less from special teams. They get Deshaun Watson back in this stretch of games, and the Tampa Bay game is included in that. Defense and special teams have sort of allowed the offense to hang around. And really, they feel like Steelers-ish in that regard, because that's the way they've been playing for especially with the husk of Ben Roethlisberger year last year. And then even now, they have the same record as the Browns. And it's because of that stuff. They play good defense. They don't do anything stupid on special teams, and they hang around, and eventually their crappy offense musters up enough points to win. You're sitting there going, how the hell is this team doing this? And it's because they do those little things correctly. And right now, the Browns are doing those little things effectively, which is a big reason. Like I said, I think I feel really good, even though the Browns are going to play in this hellscape on Saturday. I still feel good about them winning this game against the Saints. Washington, I think, is going to be really tough. And then I feel good about them competing against the Steelers again. And it's because of those things. It's because the defense is playing well. It's because special teams is suddenly playing well. It's, Watson's getting better every week. And hopefully you're going to, that's going to keep going and going and going to the point where eventually they're going to, go off on that side of the ball. But that's been the reason that this looks like they can do this. And I part of me wants to see them go 9-8 for no other reason than for all the people who have been insisting the entire year how the Browns are going in the wrong direction. They're regressing. If they go 9-8, I'm very curious to see what people say.
Yeah, things are all going to come together at the very last game of the season, right? So then it'll just leave us hanging on, waiting for next year, per usual, Pete. But listen, I would rather have it that way. This is why I want to see them win these final few games, because I would rather much talk about the offseason of hope and what's to come versus talking about who should lose their job, what players won't be on the team anymore, did this team give up, who didn't finish playing, I'm just down to have conversations about what's to come versus having all those conversations about who gave up on their team. I just want to see the efforts, and I want to see this team click and get better and have all sides play well at the same time, because we still really haven't seen that either.
No, but to your point, like you mentioned earlier, talking about why are these guys playing hard and what does this all mean? If the Browns win out, players are going to notice this.
Right.
They're going to see, Deshaun Watson's back. And if they are to win these last 3 in a row, they will have won their last 6 of their last 7. Deshaun Watson will be back, hopefully playing better than, some of these games have allowed. And unfortunately, the Saints game sucks because it's going to sort of defer that yet again, most likely. But all of a sudden, if the Browns finish 9-8, Deshaun Watson looks better. All these things are going well, and all these, they all look good heading the offseason. they're going to be noticed. And it, we mentioned about Jarvis Landry. At one point, Jarvis Landry's plan was hoping that Deshaun Watson would end up in either New Orleans or Atlanta, and he was going to sign wherever Watson went. Jadeveon Clowney said flat out, I want to play where Deshaun Watson goes. Whatever we may think about him as a person, he is a draw for people. Myles Garrett is a draw for people. Like, they have a lot of these players where you sit there and you look at them and you go, holy crap, there's a lot of guys there, and I could be those extra pieces. So like when people are like, get mad at me and say, well, the Browns didn't really sort of pull their punches because they re-signed Jadeveon Clowney and they re-signed Anthony Walker. They could have saved that money and not spent it and rolled that over. Well, here's the thing. They're part of that draw, because if they are kept, I think part of the reason they were kept is because the Browns do want to keep them again. Cap space and a ton of holes isn't as attractive as still a lot of cap space, but less, and way fewer holes, because then it's very easy for somebody who may or may not play for the Washington Commanders, who may or may not be playing against the Browns in a couple of weeks, and sitting there going, where would I like to play next year? I don't want to play here, most likely, because it sucks. But what looks good to me? Does this look good? I can easily envision myself plugging myself into the middle of that defense and being a big component and helping them be that piece that becomes like, the last piece of that defensive puzzle, or whatever it is. A guy, beyond Darren Payne or Duran, I would love him to jump on the show and tell me which way it's supposed to be. Or Jerry Hughes, who's crushed it for a useless Houston Texans team this year, who says, look, man, I've made my money. I want to come play. There's a lot of people who think Brandon Cooks with the Houston Texans wants to come play for the Browns. That's going to be a factor, and everybody's going to, don't get me wrong. There are going to be people who are like, I don't know if I want to play in Cleveland. I don't know this, that, or the other, but that becomes a big deal. And I think people will be surprised at how valid the Browns become as a potential destination. They're not going to get everybody, but they're going to get, they could put themselves in a position to get enough pieces where they're sitting there going, yeah, we can be a Super Bowl contender in 23 to 26. That's their window. That's where all this focuses on. That's what this is all building towards. So I'm very curious to see what happens. And I'm very interested to see what Sunday brings, I think, or Saturday, in a game where it's going to be horrendous in terms of weather. It's going to make the Browns sort of really emphasize this running game they're trying to implement. I think it's going to give them an opportunity to sort of branch that out even further and push it to the limits. That's going to be interesting, if they can win it doing that. And then, a couple of road games and we'll see where they end up.
Yes. Although Saturday, we haven't even addressed at this point. Blizzard conditions. I don't think I'm going to get to see this offense just open up and see what we're potentially working with. Like, it's not going to come on Saturday, Pete. So I have to, I guess, look forward to the final two games, which is also questionable just based on where they are.
Right. Washington and then Pittsburgh. And who knows? Yeah. It's, the sweet weather games of that last month is just all awful. And there are people who don't want a dome here, and I don't get it. I don't see the attraction. And look, I coach in weather. I don't coach in anything like this because we're done way before this happens. But people who think this is like some badge of courage or honor or something to be in wind chills that dropped to -9, and it's not even the temperature's less of it. It's the wind. It's just stupid. It's 60 miles per hour.
60 miles per hour gusts and just like normal 30-mile-per-hour winds. Like, that's just going to be the regular flow.
And I know people have this, you got this in that Buffalo Miami game where like you got that romantic, exciting game where you got the weather just right, where it was just snow and ice and all this other stuff. And you're like, wow, this is a really fun game and a great ending. I that's fine. I don't know if I want that every week, even if it works out that way. But this is like when the Browns faced Deshaun Watson the last time. That was not a fun game for anybody. That was hellish and it was miserable. And it just amounted to finally Nick Chubb got that big run to win the game, but it wasn't fun. It wasn't like, it didn't feel like an accurate representation of what we were doing. or what we wanted to see. So like at that point, and again, I look at this as, what are you trying to sell? I think a dome helps you in that not only with fans, obviously, but with potentially players that they know 8 games at least per year, they're going to be in the comfy indoors of a regulated dome. But yeah, I'm never going to understand that. Like if you had your choice every time, you would pick a dome. Now, if you are one of these people who thinks this is some great thing, I hope you're there. I hope you go and you're in the stands and you're watching it, because if you really believe that, you need to suffer along with them, because that's the only way it's going to make any sense to me.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. Okay, so Pete, speaking of tickets, I have 2 that I'm not going to the game because it's Christmas Eve and I will actually be at church. But if there's anyone interested in using the tickets, I would be more than happy to give Cleveland Browns fans a chance to go and freeze their butts off in the negative temperatures. And all you have to do is let us know you listen to the show. I will go from there to pick our winner. It's 2 tickets, club section. So there is actually a chance at warmth, right? You can, I guess, go to the game to watch it inside.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, that's at least, it's a hell of an option for somebody to, who might not otherwise get to go, or you've got family in town who's a Browns fan or whatever that might want to go. Who knows?
Yeah.
But anyway,
we'll put a tweet out tomorrow too, because we'll see if anyone makes it to this length of the podcast.
Yeah. So, like I said, if I think it's an interesting opportunity if you want to jump on that. But beyond that, the Browns are 6-8. I think they've got a really good chance to go 7-8. I'm curious to see how this conversation evolves as the Browns keep winning, in terms of how awful and disappointing, and this is where careers go to die and all those other things. But beyond that, we will be back. Now, important to note, the next 2 weeks, Bri will be on a very well-deserved vacation. Coordinates unknown. I don't want to,
Don't dox me.
Yes. So she will be out. So Abby will be subbing in for her. We're excited about that, but we will be talking about how they do against the Saints, and then following that, how they do against Washington. And then obviously, unless Bri has just decided she's done.
Maybe this is my permanent vacation. We'll see.
Then she will be back to wrap it up, and then we can go to the off season where she can talk all the draft picks she wants.
I'll be doing all my mock drafts.
Yes, I know you're a very big fan of those. So the passion, the energy, it's all good. But yeah, anyway, big shout out to people on YouTube. Has been unbelievable. You guys who listen on YouTube are awesome. So shout out to you guys. Beyond that, follow us there if you want, but tell a friend, reviews, all those things are very helpful. We like doing this. Hopefully you guys enjoy us, and hopefully you have other people in your life who you think would like this as well, by all means. But last but not least, since this is the last one before, Merry Christmas. And we are still in, I think we're still in Hanukkah right now, so happy Hanukkah.
Merry Christmas
for all everybody who's celebrating all those things. And we will be back next week.